Hi gang, the joy of football this week is affected, like the whole world of football, by the death of Diogo Jota. We start with a new segment, You Gave Us the Joy, inspired by him.
And we're taking on board your comments with a feedback session, which I've really enjoyed looking at all the messages we've had to deal with. Really good stuff.
Letter from the Gantry is Martin's years of covering the Asia Cup.
And on an international front, Neil's voice of passion about the way international football has been affected by the movement of players from one continent to another.
And we finish with three of the best, young player, old player, and all the way through, there's no escaping it. Diogo Jota keeps popping up. If you want to get more involved with the podcast, don't forget you can go on the Patreon. Feel free to subscribe and get more involved. And don't forget to read us on our substack.com site. The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for a shot in! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello, the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, on a cloudy, sunny day this summer, which back in the Kingston kitchen is causing issues with our lighting, with the skylight. So all I can say is hope that when it blurs us out, it's me and not Martin.
Commentators like to stay in the shade, in the shadows. You know, we let the presenters get the glory.
Commentators
and the footballers, of course.
Commentators used to get July off every third year in the 4-year World Cup cycle. No longer the case. Club World Cup, Gold Cup, of course, in North and Central America, and the big one, the Euros, the Women's Euros. Women's Euros started on a regular 4-year basis run by UEFA in 1987, and we've had them ever since, but they're massive now. They were small then, and UEFA only did it because individual associations were organising it themselves. They were forced into it.
I think you, if you bring it more up to date, Neil, there have been a lot of pre-season friendlies covered by British television, and I certainly have done my share of those, and you'll hear about some of them in our letter from the Gantry later on. So a bit of July was maybe... I remember you used to go to, a long time ago, I used to go and watch the football in the USA as part of my summer break, because there were so many friends from England playing in those in the 70s and the early 80s. So it was a busman's holiday, I guess you could call it.
We're going to start with a one-off segment that we hope stays a one-off. You gave us the joy, and it gives us a chance to talk about the Diogo Jota tragedy, and of course his brother Andre Silva. Football-wise, I just want to say I saw his first Premier League goal. It was in December 2018. He'd been the top scorer for Wolves in the Championship the previous season when they got promoted, and he hardly played. He could only have been 21, 22. He'd hardly played when they got up in the Premier League to begin with, and I was only aware of him when I went up to Wolves versus Chelsea, because he just captained Portugal under-21s and got a hat-trick in the previous international break. But he started the game at Molineux, and he scored when he lost Tony Rudiger in order to get into the penalty area and score the winner. And I've been aware of him ever since. We've talked about him a lot as a player on this podcast.
And as a person as well. I think that's part of the dreadful feeling of cruelty that this has happened, that the word tragic gets used in all sorts of non-tragic consequences. This is a total tragedy for football, but for most of all for the family. Obviously we send our sentiments the same as everybody else in the football family. We're absolutely annihilated by it emotionally, to be honest with you. But as a person, I obviously get to know in my job what people are like. I didn't meet him that often, but what I did know was that he was both one of the lads, but also very highly principled as well, that if he saw something that he didn't agree with in the dressing room, he'd stand up to anybody and say his piece, immensely popular. I think all the tributes emphasise that point, and just an awful loss.
I just want to go back in time and try and measure what it means. And car crashes are so different from accidents, from other deaths through illness. I mean, obviously it's the same with heart attacks, that quite a few footballers
premature
suffer.
is what you're talking about.
But it's instant. One moment you're there, and the next moment you're not. And it happened in the 70s, affecting my Chelsea when Peter Houseman was killed in a car crash, a laconic left winger. But it happened in the 1980s. Laurie Cunningham, the first player to leave English football for Real Madrid. But he'd just played for Wimbledon a year earlier, come on as a sub in the cup final when they beat Liverpool, crazy game. And again in the 2010s, Jose Antonio Reyes, who of course had a good career at Arsenal, he died in a car crash in 2019. But each of those three cases, Houseman had left Chelsea and was at Oxford United. Cunningham had left Wimbledon and was at Rayo Vallecano. And Reyes had left Arsenal and was an Extremadura. All those three cases, it wouldn't have affected the dressing room in that they weren't missing the person because the person had gone. They weren't missing the player because the player
an ex-player.
They were missing the person.
Yeah.
But I want to go to one other case where it was different, and that was Jimmy Davis, the Manchester United youngster who went on loan to Watford. And in 2003, he was killed in a car crash the night before the first game of the season. And the first game of the season was therefore postponed. And Watford, I think, had just been in the FA Cup semi-final. And Danny Webber, ex-Manchester United, ex-teammate at Manchester United, was now at Watford, teammate. And he was the one most affected by it. And 10 years later, he wrote an article about the whole year. And he said that the Watford game was postponed, the first game of the season. And he said that the dressing room never really recovered. It was awful. And he sort of suffered grief the whole year. And just Watford didn't have the year they were expecting to have after the previous season, and how it affected them. And he wrote beautifully about it in an article in The Guardian. And I just want to bring it up to date and say, we have absolutely no idea how this will affect the Liverpool dressing room. But we have to respect whatever happens at Liverpool at the beginning of the season, because you cannot anticipate and you cannot cope with what has happened. There is a hole in their dressing room, and it can't be replaced. And who knows? It may help them build and galvanise and come together in some way, but it can cause all sorts of grief, just plain grief. And I think that nobody should get over analytical about the beginning of Liverpool's season after this, because it is horrendous.
Whatever they do, they'll want to do it in Diogo's name, I'm sure.
So, yeah. Great player.
And Liverpool as a football club, as you would expect in this situation, have acted with real class. And the general worldwide outpouring of grief tells you everything you need to know about Diogo Jota.
Right, that's all. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Much missed. Right, we're going to have our rare feedback segment now. Feedback, in which we just respond to some of your messages. And we've had quite a few quite long ones, so I'm going to race through them. The first one is from Lucy Swan. Dearest Martin and Neil and co. I adore your podcast. I love your voices and I love the great discussions. I only have one thing to ask, though. Pretty please, could you balance out the audio levels? They are really uneven depending on how far you are from the mic. I listen to every episode but can never find the right volume to land on. Sometimes I can hardly hear you. Sometimes I can hardly hear you.
I think that's not you, Neil.
And sometimes,
I would say everybody can hear you. I think what Lucy is saying is, Martin, pretend that you are presenting a radio show and have done for the last 30 years, like the gentleman sitting next to me, and maybe give it a bit more. And so, Lucy, a personal apology on that. With television, you don't have to speak all the time, and here you have to do a lot more talking than probably I do in a commentary. When I can get a word in sideways, which I try hard to do, I must say, in defence of our production team, who are really responsible for the technical side of it, they are brilliant. They have started from scratch in making us being able to scratch the subject of football on a weekly basis. And without them, this podcast wouldn't exist. And as I am learning about the spoken word rather than the television word, I suppose it's the same. It's a different form of radio, isn't it? But you've got a picture to keep your attention span going when I'm doing my work. So no criticism of our technical youngsters, and they are the youth team. Although they tell me they're a bit older than I think they are, which is a bit worrying, really. And we will do everything possible. And I can still shout, "Goal!" That's probably blown the system.
I totally disagree with you.
Okay.
I think it's my fault. Let me just finish what Lucy says. Sometimes I can hardly hear you, and sometimes I jump out of my seat. Surely your producers can do some twiddling of some knobs. A mastering of the audio before release. I will continue to listen even if you don't fix it, but really would be brilliant. Okay, enough moaning for one evening. Loads of love and keep the episodes coming. Lucy. Well, I think it's me because I know that when I project, all of a sudden, everything goes off the board.
The dial, I think, is the word you're seeking.
And I keep getting told off about it. By our producers, and I never quite master it because I just get too passionate. So sorry, Lucy, when I get too passionate, twiddling the knobs doesn't really make a difference.
We need a fine.
Yeah, Billy says we need a fine system. So there you go. We hear you, and I will try and control my volume.
Well, we hear you, but do you hear us? That's the most important thing. Work in progress.
Right, we've had a couple come in about the voice of passion on atmosphere and how there's too much noise at games now. This is, first of all, from Martin Booth. This is spot on. Those last few minutes before kickoff are a crucial time when the fans can play their part in building the excitement. Bombarding us with adverts, the pitchside DJ, or some idiot telling us to get behind the team, as if we need telling, blots that opportunity. It's as if they don't trust us to sing. As for complaints about the fans not getting behind the team enough during games, note how that is never mentioned after matches when the side plays with tempo and adventure. There have been some games this season when the atmosphere as a result was fantastic. It's a two-way street. We're there to sing and cheer, and we're ready to do so, but the side's tactics definitely play a part when they give us something to sing about. And Kerry Camp says, the PA overshadows all of the singing that does happen, and it has no chance to build within the stadium. FIFA needs to quit monetising the game. It is killing it.
That's in two separate points there. But the PA is a real problem for us commentators because they have these big blocks of loudspeakers around the stadium, and often they are above where we're sitting, and it does limit to what can be done. And we try and get them switched off. Even it doesn't really involve me much these days, but interviews being done on the touchline before the game for live broadcast or later on, you have people scurrying up to the sound control box saying, can you please turn it off for a couple of minutes? And it's more and more reluctant. The clubs are more, they want more of their output. You can understand that, I suppose. But it's a balancing act. I just want the singing. I just want the fans to be there a bit earlier. That's probably what
you won't get that on two counts. One, the club don't want it because they're buying beers and alcohol in the back of the stand, which they can't take pitch side. They're spending their money. They want them to spend their money in the bars. And B, the supporters don't want it anymore because they don't need to get there anymore. I like to get there, like you anyway, to watch the warm-up. But that's because we're sad old men. Right, no. We're going to go a bit global next. This is Alan Lake. Hi, I'm Blakey. Alan Blake. I'm Blakey, the blue-nosed brummie, and will be a regular commentator on your podcast. I've just watched Martin on the Crouchy podcast and immediately subscribed to your channel and have started to binge your content.
Good man, Blakey.
We'll come back to that in a second. The other one, dear Martin and Neil, thank you very much for this amazing podcast. I enjoy listening to every week. Your fan from Egypt, Mahmood. You went on the Crouchy podcast, of course.
Yes, it was with Steve Sidwell. It was excellent fun for me. I don't know what it was like for the listeners, but the odd thing about it is that Peter lives, as I mentioned in the podcast, he lives in the same village as me, but is a railway line going through the middle of it, and I live one side of the tracks, and he lives on the other side of the track. But we did find ourselves, I suppose it's not a coincidence really, since we use the same railway station. We went up to Peter's studio, which is near the Shard, and we went up together by coincidence, as I say, on the train. We were both called for the same time. So we had a great chat on the way up and did the podcast, and then came back together again to our little Surrey village. So great people. I mean, both Peter and Steve Sidwell I've commentated on many a time, and it's really good. It's one of the joys of having a longish career. Really, is that you're seeing people in different stages of their life, and post playing. It's not easy for everybody, but when you see people who are doing very well with what they've gleaned from the football world. Obviously, fame is one thing you glean, but it's all part of knowing the person, really, which is what I've said many times about the commentary. It is about the team, of course. It is about the result, but it's those who actually make that team work and make the results happen.
A couple from America around the Club World Cup. Katie Watson, the heat wave and pop-out showers on the East Coast during the Club World Cup hasn't had the best timing. I'm located in Charlotte, and we hosted Real Madrid at Bank of America Stadium and had over 70,000 attendees, so it was really bustling in the city over the weekend. Now we just need to get that crowd for Charlotte FC and fill it up like that. And SPW, who, if you were SWP, might be Sean Wright Phillips. SPW, I joke that the hydration and cooling break is like the end of the first quarter and third quarter of the game. Now, this is exactly what you've been talking about.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it is. And maybe in the end they will make it 4 quarters instead of 2 halves. The timing of games at half-time is stretched, and we're going to get the biggest half-time of all time in the final of the FIFA Club World Cup, because they've got a show to put on. The Super Bowl, it says in the laws of the game that you can only have 15 minutes for half time. I am telling you now, they're going to break that regulation, and obviously it's a FIFA tournament, so IFAB might have a say about it, but it will be deemed a one-off. I'd be surprised if it is a one-off.
I didn't even know that there was a show in the middle.
This for the final, it's been hyped up, Neil, and you don't deal in that kind of part of the newspaper
crap.
Anyway.
That kind of crap. Yeah. No,
But I don't like it. I have to say, I played, there was 10 minutes at halftime. It was about right. You could rehydrate, but you didn't start to stiffen up. If you got a knock or anything like that, you could just move around the change room, get back out again quickly. I think 15 minutes is too long and has been for a while, but that's down to television and need to get a commercial in when they go off and a commercial in before they come back on. And with all the substitutes now, we're getting more and more stoppages. The games are lasting longer and longer with the added time as well.
And I come back and say, I would introduce a new law that the manager can shout from his manager's area. What do they call it?
The dugout.
No, not the dugout.
The technical area.
Thank you, Billy. The technical area. He can shout while the game's in progress and everything, but he cannot call a player over, and he cannot speak to them and give instructions in that way.
Well, the player had just come over on some preordained sign, and you wouldn't know whether the manager had called him over or not. There's always a way around these things.
But it's got to be made harder. That's all.
Wow.
One final one, again, I think from America, quoting what was quoted to me about what American food is, which I told on here. This is from AJ Bael. Double the normal American food is any recipe that you like. Double the ingredients and quadruple the meat. And he adds, no lies were told. Dead right. Right. How was your eating covering the Club World Cup?
Functional, because we were at the stadium a lot, so the stadium in Philadelphia, so there was a catering service there for the crew, and I was part of the host broadcast crew, so no complaints, not that much variety, but they were doing it. I was there 16, 17 days, so you are going to get the same dishes coming around again. I went out a couple of times, but only to not what you would call a typical US burger meal out, but there were those who were complaining about the excess baggage going back, and they weren't talking about the luggage. I just about escaped that, I think. But no, listen, it is where you don't go there to a place to change it. You go there to enjoy it, and that's what I did.
Listen, you can eat brilliantly in the States now, wherever you go. But you can still eat absolute garbage as well.
Same everywhere.
Hey ho! Look at our producers; they eat absolute garbage in London. So they're all nodding.
They can only afford garbage in London because of what we don't pay them, Neil. That's the reason.
That is feedback. Keep it coming, and we'll have it every so often. Next up, Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
Well, as always, thank you, Neil, for the intro. It is this time in the football calendar which always reminds me of the Premier League Asia Trophy, a competition which ran in every odd-numbered year from 2003 to 2019 inclusive. It has been replaced more recently by the Summer Series in the USA, though a return to Asia is still a possibility. There were 9 such tournaments, and I was fortunate to be present at all. 4 in Hong Kong, 1 each in Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and on mainland China, 1 each in Beijing and Shanghai. The format was a 4-team competition with 3 Premier League teams and 1 local club. That was changed to a full house of sides from England for the last 2 editions, but you get the picture. 2 semi-finals and then a playoff for third, followed by a final for the trophy itself. Chelsea had just been taken over by Roman Abramovich when they took part in the inaugural tournament in 2003. Signings were arriving thick and fast, and Damien Duff and Wayne Bridge were on the same flight as me as they jetted out to meet their new teammates. And the first piece of silverware for the new regime was claimed indeed in Kuala Lumpur. Chelsea pipping Newcastle United in a shootout in which hotshots Alan Shearer and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank failed to convert. A poor Panenka attempt from Jermaine Genius was the decisive moment. His manager, Bobby Robson, had a face like thunder. 2 years later, Everton became the first and only Premier League club to be downed by local opposition, a Thailand under-23 team. Again, penalties involved. But they lost to Bolton Wanderers in the final. It was the first time I saw signs of the massive increase in backroom staff in pursuit of marginal gains. Bolton boss Sam Allardyce was way ahead of his time. One other standout memory, Manchester City's Ben Thatcher took advantage of a stadium equipped for athletics by putting in full tilt efforts into the long jump pit as part of his warm-up. Next, in 2007, it was Liverpool, a massive draw in Hong Kong. They got to the final against Harry Redknapp's Portsmouth. The Reds' big summer signing, Fernando Torres, didn't arrive in time to be registered for the competition, but Harry generously waived any right he had to stop Torres from playing in the final. Such largesse paid off. Another penalty shootout, and from the spot the expensive Spaniard failed. Redknapp stalwart Nico Cranchard didn't, and the Asia Trophy headed to Fratton Park. But the craziest experience I ever had came in 2009. The host team, Beijing Guan, lost in the semi-final to Hull City. Friend of our podcast, Tom Kenny, was in the Hull squad. It meant a 3rd-4th playoff for the hosts against West Ham. But when I got their lineup, 5 or 6 names were not on the official squad list, which had to be submitted before the competition began. Nobody on the admin side had noticed this, so I had to walk onto the pitch during the warm-up and find a player who spoke English, ask who he was, and to point out the other newcomers for me, where they'd come from and why they'd come. It transpired that the regulars had a domestic game a couple of days later, and protocol or no protocol, they wouldn't be wasting any energy against the Hammers. These extras had been loaned in for the day from another Beijing team. I was like a police constable called to an incident. Name, please, sir. What is your nationality? What position are you going to play? West Ham won comfortably. Spurs incidentally beat Hull 3-0 in the final, a couple of goals from Robbie Keane. In 2011, Chelsea became the only club to regain the Asia Trophy. Josh McEachran, then 18 years old, scored after 36 seconds past Aston Villa's Shay Given. A clincher came from the aforementioned Fernando Torres, who'd not made much of an impact since moving to London in that winter window. He was brought on as a substitute, alongside, rather than instead of Didier Drogba, to earn a medal that he'd cost himself and Liverpool 4 years earlier. 2013 nearly didn't happen at all. Deluges hit Hong Kong. The pitch was a bog, sawdust was spread, matches were shortened. Manchester City brought with them a new manager in Manuel Pellegrini, who soon made it clear that he wasn't in the business of marking a commentator's card, though he did later mellow at West Ham. Spurs brought with them a departing player, Gareth Bale, who understandably didn't feature in those terrible conditions, so he was fit for his upcoming move to Real Madrid just a few weeks later. Without the wonder from Wales, Spurs lost in the final to City, a goal from Edin Dzeko. 2015 saw what seemed the longest journey for an Asia Trophy tournament to Singapore. Stoke City fielded the irrepressible pair of Peter Crouch and Steve Sidwell, top-of-the-range podcaster and his sidekick these days. Now, Crouchy had family history out there, and the first language he learnt as a toddler was Mandarin. Attempts to dig out a word or two from him in the local language failed miserably. Steve scored to secure 3rd place for the Potters after a penalty defeat to Everton in the semi-final, but Arsenal saw off the Toffees in the final 3-1. Liverpool, Leicester, Crystal Palace and West Bromwich Albion made up a Premier League 4 in 2017. Palace finished 3rd under their new manager, Frank de Boer, though the famous Dutchman was only to last a handful of Premier League games when the regular season started. Liverpool won the trophy this time, beating Leicester in the final, helped by a goal from a promising newcomer called Mo Salah. Shanghai was the venue in July 2019, and there was talk of flu at the time when the competition was taking place, though no one could have imagined the COVID pandemic allegedly started in China, which was about to follow. Wolves put 4 past Newcastle, who were waiting the arrival of their new manager, Steve Bruce. Manchester City put 4 past West Ham. In the final itself, Raheem Sterling sent a penalty over the bar just before half-time. The Wolves keeper, Rui Patricio, saved 3 spot kicks in the subsequent shootout. There are joyous photos of Wolves winning what at the moment is the last Asia Trophy, but it's impossible not to be drawn to one smiling face in particular, that of Diogo Jota.
I'm going to pull you up on your pronunciation.
Yeah, Abramovich.
Yeah, I was instructed early on. It was Roman Abramovich.
Yeah, I know.
That was how I was.
But if I'd been told by himself, I would have done it. But being told by you, Neil, with your track record.
No, I was told by his.
Yeah, I've noticed when we've mentioned his name in the past. I nearly did it for you, but I couldn't be sure that I would enunciate it correctly.
That Kuala Lumpur, the first one.
You were there.
Yeah. And it was a torrid time. He'd just taken over. An internal war was breaking out between the people who had been running the club between Chairman Ken Bates and Chief Executive Trevor Birch. And I remember getting stuck in the middle of it and coming crying to you for some kind of advice.
Looking back on it, it was really
it was brilliant.
It was a historic time, wasn't it? Because it was the beginning, at the beginning of the new era.
Yeah. It was a week in Kuala Lumpur. I loved it. I loved the city and the food. I had wonderful food in Kuala Lumpur. I remember an all-night session at some shack down in of a bar where you could have bites as well down in the city.
That's the difference between you. That's why we balance off so well. For me, it's go to bed early, make sure I'm fresh for the commentary, and you're having all-night sessions.
You kept British
I did.
time.
I've actually, in a number of these tournaments that I've mentioned, I lived, because they were only 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
I think Kuala Lumpur was one of the longer ones. And I found it easier to not have to have jet lag to come back. I've just gone through that from Philadelphia, having been there for 16 days. So.
I do remember the penalty shootout in that one. Bobby Robson was furious with Jermaine Genius.
I can't imagine more fury ever on a manager's face than television captured.
Yeah. I was there backstage after, so he was furious. I do remember recently, not as part of the Asia Cup, but a game, I can't remember if it was Real Madrid, Barcelona, or if it was Manchester United, Liverpool or something. A game got cancelled in China because of a thunderstorm that completely drenched the pitch and it wasn't playable. And I mean, it was a game in which probably both sides were going to get $2 million or whatever, pounds for probably dollars for playing it.
It was certainly then 2013. If it was a spin-off from that, the clubs, not obviously Real Madrid involved in the Premier League trophy, but the Manchester City and Spurs one, how we got through that, it was almost hourly reports from the ground, and I think they played half an hour each way in one of the semi-finals, maybe both of them. But there was a will to do what you're really pointing to get the commercial side of it, and it has worked. I mean, the Far East has fantastic support for the Premier League.
I mean, I will say one thing that everyone says, "Oh, India, cricket nation, not interested in football." They adore football in cricket. Of course they do. They get the joy of football as much as anybody else does. But the climate in summer, the humidity and the heat and the rains, you couldn't really, you'd struggle to tour India in the summer and prepare your season.
I may be wrong in this, but I'm not sure I've seen the Indian Football League on. I know people from English football have gone out and worked down there, but I haven't seen a regular, whereas you can watch the Saudi League now, can't you? And they to make that work, they really need that kind of global coverage, which is obviously the best example of that are the big leagues themselves.
Interesting. Right, okay. You can, of course, read Martin's letters from the Gantry. I'm loading them up one by one, slowly, and my musings on all things that I'm passionate about on our Substack site, The Joy of Football, on substack.com. Get on there and have a read of all things. And you can, of course, subscribe to this podcast if you love it. And you can subscribe to it if you like it. And you can put comments if you don't like it. There you go. And don't forget, if you want to get closer to us, get on that Patreon. Right, we move on with Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
Followed by Martin's Voice of Reason, of course. My Voice of Passion this week is really coming out of what's happening in the Club World Cup in USA, where the Brazilian clubs have done much better than expected. Now, only one in the end made the semi-final, but they were pretty much, I think they were undefeated in the group stage. Maybe they lost one. And they have been very hard to beat, and they've done much better than it probably expected. Not so much the Argentine clubs are in a bit of a mess, River Plate and Boca Juniors at the moment, but the Brazilian clubs especially. And it just got me looking back. Now, if you look at the World Cups, since they started, obviously the first one in 1930 was won by Uruguay. The second one, 34 and 38 wasn't. We then had the Second World War. But if you go from the end of the Second World War, the World Cups, South American clubs, which was Brazil or Argentina, won Uruguay won it again in 1950.
They did.
1958 and 62 Brazil, 70 Brazil, 78 and 86 Argentina, 94 and 2002 Brazil. They were regularly winning the World Cup. But since 2002, bless you, since 2002, it's only been won once by a South American club, and that
the
was
last time.
Argentina. And the interesting thing is, it was towards the end of the 1990s with Serie A to begin with, but much more with the Premier League this century, and also increasingly across Europe, Russia, Ukraine, before it was invaded, that the best South American players came to Europe and played the European season. And I think that is the reason that so many times the South Americans have underperformed at the World Cup, because they're knackered. And the interesting thing about Argentina winning the World Cup is it was the November-December World Cup. So they got in their summer rest, and they were fresh in the way that the South Americans were fresh in the summer World Cups, because they just got 2 or 3 months into their season. And I think what I really think is that there was far too much fuss made by European associations about the November-December World Cup in Qatar. I thought that was a bit imperialistic of us rich Europeans, and in fact it worked in favour of European countries. It's just it worked in favour of South American players who play in European countries as well.
Well, I'll throw another thing at you, is that the South American countries won when it was in the Americas, and the European countries won when it was in Europe.
In the old years.
Well, no, right up until Germany won in Brazil.
Well, yeah, Brazil won in Sweden in '58.
But for the successes, that is that obviously but now we've had, and of course Brazil won in Asia.
Yeah,
in
Japan,
in
South
2002.
Korea.
But that was a thing about
and Spain won in South Africa.
Yeah, well, that's like neutral ground.
This is
like Asia, and obviously, but to win, it was an away win, if you like, in 1958. And the 17-year-old Pele, and those players didn't come and play for European clubs. It probably wasn't even possible with the laws of the land then for the workers to come, without some sort of extra permits. And we've had all that down the years to try and get to where we are now, and it's a pretty good system at the moment, I think. But it's a global game. Television's made it so global. The attraction of being able to see football from any part of the world, really, on the press of a button. There are young footballers looking at their television screens thinking, I'd like to go and play in that country. It might be the other way around. There are people going from Europe to play in Brazil. And we finally, obviously I saw Jorginho eventually make I know it's his homeland, but to go back and play for the first time for a Brazilian club. I just think it's a world market. I do think the best teams over there, when we get to World Cups, there is a fatigue factor, there is a climate factor. We're now going to talk about the USA next year and what's going to happen with all the storms.
Not USA. I keep saying this.
USA, Canada, and Mexico.
I mean, that's over half the length of the globe. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, is it a North American World Cup? Is that what we count? Mexico
North and
is
Central
that
America.
North and Central, isn't it? Yeah, and Mexico, of course, have had, they had the '70 World Cup. By default, really, they had the World Cup in '86.
USA had the '94 World Cup, but that's where the money is, brother.
Yes, and
it's not corrupt at all. Everybody,
you can't blame businesses for trying to make the most money. I mean, I've said this before on this podcast. Infantino's job is to make money for FIFA.
No, his job is to run football globally.
The subtext of that is to make money for FIFA, who are his employers. Don't forget. So anyway, that's a political statement. We don't need to get into
No,
that.
he doesn't have an employer. He has an electorate.
Well,
he's voted in. I don't. He may be paid by them, but he's got an electorate, and yeah. Don't get me started.
I'm not going to get you started.
I'm talking about.
There's just a change in. There's a smaller world. That's really what you're saying, isn't it? And I suppose that impacts on all sorts of things, business, all sorts of businesses, sport being one of them, and the industry gets good things out of that, and maybe there is a consequence in terms of countries that we sort of associate that because of our age. We're always looking for Brazil and Argentina going to be major competitors, and indeed they usually are.
But what I'm really concluding is that it hasn't done the South American countries any favours as national teams having their best players playing in Europe.
Yes, but the players have the right to do that. The players are taking back when they go back home. They're taking back wealth beyond their wildest dreams, and you can't be denying that just because the one consequence does mean that part of the football circle of life is not going to be exactly as it was before. The players, for me, are what the game's all about. And for them, we ask them to make the most of their opportunities on the field. They've got to make the most of their opportunities in the industry, and by and large, they do. And it's a industry with a global feel and a lot of profit in it, and a lot of wealth. So I was at the League Managers Association dinner where they honoured the managers who reached 1,000 games, and Jurgen Klopp and Jose Mourinho both there in that category. And Jose Mourinho had to look with a bit of embarrassment as Klopp turned to him and said, "Of course, it's about health, but it's about wealth, Jose, isn't it?" And you are clearly implying that he'd made a lot of money. I'm sure Jurgen's made a lot of money as well, but it's
shows he's been sacked more often than Jurgen.
We've lived through. Football, when I started following it, was big and popular within a very small field, and the game was a back page story. It wasn't. It's not going to lead the news.
Until George Best came along.
Yeah, it started. There were changes, but it was a very much a sort of almost feudal society at the beginning, and the wages, the slave wages as they called it then. The change has been massive, and of course, not everything can keep pace with all the. That's the way as the world goes round.
Voice of passion, voice of reason, voice of passion wins it.
I'm calling VAR.
Yeah. Lots of people are calling VAR, but we can't repeat what they're calling it. 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay. And that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
Right. We're doing well so far. We're going to get through this quickly, this podcast. When I spoke to Billy on the phone yesterday, he screamed at me, "Don't go on for too long." So we're getting there.
The worry is that the producers are getting sick of hearing from us. I just hope the listeners aren't. That's all.
Young player, old player.
Yes.
Here we go. Martin, your young player.
He just squeezes in, Neil, to our category. He's 24, actually. Igor Jesus, who's the striker from Brazil, and Botafogo, who's signed for Nottingham Forest. Botafogo seemed to be there were a talk of 3 players going. I think it's now only 2. Jair Cunha, the young centre-half, who's 20, and that deal hasn't been done yet. He would have really qualified as a young player. I saw them both play against Palmeiras in Philadelphia. Igor Jesus was fresh from having got the winning goal against PSG, which was as a wonderful feather in his cap. He's been playing in the Emirates, so he's not very well known, perhaps even in Brazil. And Botafogo have been bringing in a lot of new players, and they ship them out very quickly, and he's being shipped out to the Premier League. He's played for Brazil. He scored on his debut And he's a traditionally sized centre forward. He doesn't wear 9; he wears 99. But I guess at Forest, I'd be surprised if 99 is permissible in the Premier League. And he's going to bolster their attack with Chris Wood, obviously had the season of his life, needing a bit of cover for him, or maybe they'll play together. And I just think he looks a good fit. I'm not saying he's going to absolutely thrash the league and be right up there in the end of the season top scorers, but the way they play, they get balls in the box, he's perfect for that. And it's an interesting background, but there is another one coming to Europe from Brazil, the point you've just been making about,
but interestingly, you've just raised in my head someone that we're not mentioning or planning to mention, but we should mention, is John Duran, because he left Aston Villa in January and went out to Saudi Arabia, and now has left there and gone on loan to Fenerbahce in Turkey. When you think that other Champions League qualifying clubs in the Premier League who are interested in signing him from Villa, and he made such a hit in the Champions League in the first half of the season, that's quite a surprise move.
Colombian, of course. I mean, again, a player who's come over to Europe. Maybe it's part of the deal. Maybe the deal was, I need to play in a more competitive league. I don't see the Saudi league very often, so we should stick up for it because of Al Hilal. And clearly, it's trying to make progress. We should stick up for anybody trying to make progress, and they certainly are. So whether that's part of, if it's a loan deal, whether there's been some disagreement, I really don't know the background to it. But it does seem an odd pathway. One thing that is disappointing was he's a really exciting player to watch and commentate on. That loan deal hasn't brought him back to England.
But Fenerbahce, it's Jose, isn't it?
Yes.
So that'd be interesting. My young players, Jamie Gittens, just signed by Chelsea from Borussia Dortmund, and I'm not so I mean, I saw Gittens come on as a substitute a couple of times, a couple of years ago when Chelsea played Dortmund in the Champions League in our previous season in it 3 years ago. And he didn't make an impression on me, but he was very young. He's had 3 good months where he scored quite a few goals, didn't make many. And then a new manager came in and has left him out. So he's not played an awful lot. But what intrigues me is that Chelsea have, in the recruitment camp, ex-Manchester City scouts and have signed since the new ownership came in, Tosin Adebayo, who from Fulham on a free transfer, but of course who I saw play in 2 Youth Cup finals, 4 games for Manchester City. You also saw him make his
debut for Manchester City in an FA Cup tie at Stamford Bridge. Yeah.
When they put out a youth team virtually and lost 5-0. 5-1. Nacho scored, I think. Yeah. No.
We'll come back to the name of the goal scorer because I think he's almost disappeared from trace. But I've got Michael looking at his phone now.
I thought it was Nacho. Oh well, there you go.
It might have been, but I think it was. We'll come back to it.
But Tosin. Then of course there's Romeo Lavia, who went via Tosin went via Fulham. Lavia went via Southampton and relegation, and has come in. Then obviously there's Cole Palmer. We've had Jadon Sancho. We've now got Liam Delap.
Yeah, people forget that Jadon Sancho was a youngster at Manchester City.
Yeah. Sancho, who really, I mean, interestingly, went to Borussia Dortmund and did brilliantly, got into the England team, went to Manchester United and flopped, went back to Borussia Dortmund on loan and got to the Champions League final and played excellently throughout the campaign, went back to United and wasn't wanted and came to Chelsea and did okay, to be fair, but wasn't his option wasn't taken up, and he's not he's now looking for a club. So Gittens is another one who left Manchester City when he was quite young, 17, I think, and went to Dortmund. And is now coming back. A lot of players who come from Germany take time to actually adapt to the Premier League. Gundogan, I mean, he took 3 years before he was suddenly a star at Manchester City. So I'm not overly confident about Gittens to begin with, but I just look at all these players coming in here at Manchester City, and I'm thinking, did Manchester City make all these mistakes? Or Chelsea making the mistakes?
David Fopala.
Got the goal?
Yeah.
Don't remember him. Sorry, David.
And has he played anywhere else?
No, we don't know him. I don't know him. I
And
thought it was Iheanacho got the goal.
One appearance, one goal, I would suggest, for Manchester City, maybe. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Martin outdoes me again. There you go. Right. Okay, so...
Anybody knows what's happened to him in his career?
So Igor...
Please let us know by the usual ways, you know.
Igor Jesus, John Duran, Jamie Gittens, and...
David Fopala. I hope I've said that right. I commentated on the game, and honestly, all I know is that one of the unknowns scored, and then I got a text that I don't think Sam would mind me saying this. I got a text from Sam Allardyce, who was not in that, because my commentary was going on the world feed, and he must have been away somewhere, and he said I was too harsh on Manuel Pellegrini, who was the manager, because they were playing Kiev away in the Champions League, and that I should understand that I was sticking up for the FA Cup, really, and that they'd sort of basically, short of not turning up, really not turned up. So yeah, that's I've got memory, but I do remember that Tosin Adarabioyo. First of all, how was I pronounce his name, which we don't use now? But yeah, I don't know. That was 2014 or something like that.
No, it was later.
Was it like?
Yeah, it was about 2017. Yeah. No, because Pat went there in 2016.
Yeah, it was before. It was definitely Pellegrini.
So it must have been 2015.
14 or 15.
Yeah. 15, 16.
15, 16.
Oh, yeah,
the season before Pep, yeah. So
right.
It would have been January or February 2016.
Old player.
Yeah, this is a bit self-indulgent, but it means a lot to me, actually. Two players that we had a fantastic season at Woking 2018-2019 under the management of Alan Dowson. I was part of the coaching staff, and we got to the game I mentioned quite a lot, and kindly Troy Deeney came on and mentioned it because he scored in it. We got to the third round of the FA Cup and played Watford at home and lost 2-0, but we also got promoted to the National League via the playoffs. And two of that team have just rejoined Woking as coaches. They've still got playing contracts, I think. The goalkeeper, Craig Ross, who was a real pillar of our team, he kept a clean sheet in the playoff final against Welling to get us promoted, and had a great season, and was absolutely number one choice. Who's been at Maidenhead since he left Woking. And they got relegated, and I guess he was released. But Woking had brought him back in. Neil Ardley's the manager, so credit to Neil. And the other's Jake Hyde, who was a forward, who scored. We beat Swindon away 1-0 to get to the third round to play Watford. And Jake scored the winner. And he'd started as a boy at Swindon, so it was a really nice story. He scored the winner in this dramatic semi-final playoff against Wealdstone when we were 2-0 down with 12 minutes to go, and he scored the winner in the 93rd minute. I think it was probably offside, but it's on YouTube. Have a look. It's great action. Full house at Woking. And then Jake had been a nomadic player. He's a little bit of an in-joke that he's struggled a bit with injuries, and now he's come back for strength and conditioning for the squad now. But I'm sure he knows a lot about it because he's done a lot of it to try and extend his predicate. But he went to Wrexham for a while in the American Dream, and after leaving Woking, so he's had a fair bit of experience. So I'm just so pleased to see him. I'm going to hopefully help with the academy again this season, and it'll be a link with the first team. And when you've been in that's our little group really of the season of you have one special season, I guess. The great managers have lots of them. And to be fair to Alan Dowson, he's had a lot of promotions. But this was a special one, especially for me at Woking. And so to have those two back, they're both 35 now. And they might play a bit, but they'll be boosting the backroom staff.
But this is the joy of football. They just have great joy in being involved in football.
They both said about coming back to it. I mean, it's another step. I know Craig's been doing a sporting director's course. He's wants to stay in the game a lot and a thoughtful man. Goalkeepers and strikers, you couldn't have two different temperaments, really. And Jake's got that little bit of showbiz about him, you know. And he and they'll complement each other, but most importantly they'll complement the main members of the staff and give Woking a bit more depth in that department. So for me, it's a personal one. So forgive me for that.
My old player is really a chance for me to respond to the transfer market. My old player is Maxwell, the Brazilian left back. Chelsea got drawn against Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League 3 years running, 2014, 15, 16. And he was all in the knockout stages, and he was left back all through that. He wasn't a very good left back, really. But he met at Ajax. He was at Ajax for 5 years, 2001 to 2006, where he met Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and they became the closest of friends. And he just seemed to follow Ibrahimovic around. So when Ibrahimovic went to Inter Milan, he went to Inter Milan. When Ibrahimovic went to Barcelona, he went to Barcelona. And when Ibrahimovic went to PSG, he went to PSG. He played a couple of times for Brazil, but he was never going to get in ahead of Marcelo or Felipe Luis or anything like that. And he was an okay left back. But somehow at PSG, he was the right man at the right club at the right time. And his career became one of not being that good to being absolutely flipping brilliant. Mm-hmm. And he was magnificent at PSG. And I damn well saw him 6 times, I assume, and he just stood out. He really stood out, and it was as though he'd found himself in his game. And in fact, he stayed on at PSG after he retired and worked in the technical department. But the point is that somehow, I remember going to a reserve game away to Millwall. Millwall versus Chelsea, and I was standing with the caretaker, 3-month temporary Chelsea manager at the time, David Webb, an old Chelsea legend, scored the FA Cup winner in 1970, and he had swapped Graham Lasseau and Steve Livingston. Graham Lasseau, who became the England left back, to Blackburn, and Steve Livingston, a young striker, to Chelsea. And he was in the reserves because he was hopeless in the first team. Top bloke, by the way, Steve Livingston. And Dave Webb said to me, he says, sometimes just the player doesn't fit the club, or the club doesn't fit the player. And Livingston moved on at the end of the season. He had a good career, and he was a top bloke. I think he had a particularly good spell at Coventry at one stage, but he was happiest in his native northeast. And Maxwell fitted PSG. And it's interesting that after he retired, they struggled at left back. Barnett played there for a few years. He was in and out the French national team. They then signed Hernandez, Lucas Hernandez. But he played more centre-back than left-back and struggled with injury. It's still there. And it wasn't really until your Nuno Mendes came into the side and rocketed very quickly to best left-back in the world, arguably. They've replaced Maxwell.
The one thing about Maxwell that disappointed me was he never wore silver boots, because in my head, the Beatles song, Ringo singing it.
No.
Wasn't it Ringo
singing it?
No,
it was Paul McCartney.
Was it?
Yeah, Macca. Yeah.
Bang, bang, Maxwell, silver hammer.
I think the quality of the
song, boys don't remember. It was a big Beatles song.
I think it was one of the songs that made John Lennon finally say, "I've had enough of this. I'm getting out."
But I just wanted to say Maxwell's Silver Hammer in the commentary, and I managed to dissuade myself. It would probably have been one of those lines that people would go, "What on earth is it?" Like it's the commentator equivalent of Dad dancing, isn't it? Really, I'm afraid. So
so Maxwell, sometimes you got to move around John Duran to find your club. That's all. And,
yes.
Your player this week.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of movement at Arsenal, isn't there? And I think they've done a deal with Martin Zubimendi, who has come in from Real Sociedad, and he's the player at half-time in the Euro final when Rodri went off, and all the England fans were thinking, wow, Rodri's gone off, they can't win without Rodri. The replacement was just as good, equally effective. And, of course, England lost right at the end of the game. He is, I would imagine, somebody who knew the Arteta family. They're from exactly the same part of Spain. So I think there'll be an immediate contact. He's obviously tried to get him for a while, and the deal's now done. And at a time when Arsenal are bringing in, it seems, other players, we're speaking with deals not done, so I'm not going to sort of speculate. But I think this one is this one with Thomas Partey leaving the club. I think it's a much needed position to fill, but I think he's of an age and upgrade. Played 19 or 20 times for Spain. I think scored in the Nations final against Portugal, which went to penalties.
This really does spell the end, doesn't it, for Declan Rice as a holding midfielder at club level, which is interesting because I can't see anything spelling the end of him as a holding midfielder at international level.
I don't know. I mean, some managers like playing with 2 6s and gives freedom for those, if you like, a front four to go where they want to go to. So it's not. It's that's in the hands of Arteta to work out what's best. But I mean, Declan can. We bow to nobody in our admiration for Declan Rice as a person and as a footballer. So he'll be in there somehow. And of course, Zubimendi's got to show that he's good enough to be in the team. But I've no doubt that he will. So interesting signing, good signing. I talk about strikers a lot, so it's about time I went into other aspects of the team.
And he's someone who chose to stay at Sociedad when the big Spanish clubs were interested in him, because of course he's a Basque boy, and you have to be a Basque boy to play for Sociedad.
Yes,
and he loved it there.
Maybe this move was already in the making, but he had to wait for it, you
know. My player's Ruben Neves, but I'm going to add one because of what happened last night. I'm going to add Raul Jimenez to it. Ruben Neves played for Al Hilal against Fluminense in USA Eastern Time the day before Jota's funeral. They lost. Actually, Cancelo was in the same team. Cancelo, who was a Portugal teammate of Diogo Jota. Ruben Neves, of course, was a Wolves teammate as well as a Portugal teammate of him. And they lost to Fluminense. I think they kicked off at 3 p.m. Eastern, which was 8 p.m. In England and Portugal, the evening before the morning funeral. And Neves and Cancelo chartered a plane, jumped on it, and made the funeral. And Neves was a pallbearer. At the funeral.
His I understand Diogo's closest friend in the football dressing room, in a sense. And it was an extraordinary effort and one that happily worked with the problems with airlines, and they clearly, and they funded this themselves. I think that probably doesn't go without saying. So and made a fantastic effort and did get there, flying from I think Orlando to Oporto.
I think as well that Wolves team which Neves was in with Matinho and Connor Cody and Rui Patricio, who you mentioned earlier on, and Jimenez.
Also, and you were going to say about what happened with...
He scored the opening goal in the Gold Cup final between Mexico and USA. This is the CONCACAF equivalent of the Euros, North and Central America. Mexico beat USA 2-1 in USA, but there were more Mexicans in the crowd than USA supporters. He scored the opening goal, and he had a Jota Mexico shirt with number 20 on it.
Mm-hmm. It was from somebody who had his own brush with death as well on the football field. Very moving.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, all this brings back where I started, that how the dressing room copes with this, we cannot say, we cannot anticipate, and when it happens, I don't think we can analyse.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Right, okay. Ruben Neves, good player, not great player, good player, but he sounds a great bloke. That's it. But we have time, very quickly. Stoppage time! And I want you to tell me about your day. Was it yesterday? Day before yesterday? You went and met someone.
Well, this is part of a project that I'm working on with our production team here. And of course, your input will always be appreciated, Neil, to honour a match and a man that was star of it in 1957 between Charlton and Huddersfield. It was an inconsequential match, really, in terms of the old second division. Except both teams had ambitions to get back into the old first division equivalent of the Premier League. Had they been relegated, Charlton 1 year and Huddersfield, the opposition, 2 years before. And it finished 7-6. 5 of the goals were scored in extraordinary, totally unique circumstances by one player, Johnny Summers, in a comeback, because all 7 goals were scored when Charlton had 10 men. Not through a red card, but an early no substitutes. An early injury meant they played 75 minutes with 10 men. And but the poignancy of it really is that Johnny Summers died of cancer within 5 years, having scored the 5 goals. But yesterday I found his family, his son, who was 15 when John died, who took me through what it was like and how, and it was very open, very moving, really, about how John was, what we should talk about him, what he like as a son for his dad to be remembered for. And we're going to do some proper interviews with him, and his and Johnny Summers' 2 grandsons were there as well. So yeah, it was. I've been intrigued by the game and the storyline and the poignancy of it, and of course, again, we're talking about somebody who left us very prematurely, who was a real football star of his day. And these things, it makes us, I think, just treasure life. That's all you can say out of these awfully premature losses to families, first and foremost, to football, of course, as well. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the interview. There was a lot of good emotion in it as well, but obviously there's some sadness. And talking back times a long time ago, he died in 1962. So hopefully, with the help of the other gentleman in the room that you're not seeing, we'll turn this into a programme worthy of his memory, and that's what we're trying to do.
And Charlton back in the second tier of English football.
Yeah, and towards the end of the season, the big win over Huddersfield to help put that promotion push. And we're also going to try and reflect, and we've got an appointment to go and see the Charlton first team very shortly after we finish here, and hopefully it'll all knit together. It's just a private enterprise, but obviously I hope that it'll reach a wide audience when we get it finished.
That's it. We did crawl over an hour in the end, so no doubt I'll get bawled at again. But we're still quicker than we were most weeks. From Martin and me.
Cheers.
Ta-ra. Thanks for listening, watching. If you made it through to the end, don't forget Patreon, Substack.com, subscribe, enjoy, comments, feedback. I would just say, Martin, when you finish doing Charlton 7, Huddersfield 6. I think your next job should be the 1954-55 game. Chelsea 5, Manchester United 6.
A 6-5 special. How many people remember that?